I was standing in the hospital corridor when I saw them through the window of room 347. Olivia's hand was intertwined with his, their fingers locked together like they'd done this 1,000 times before. She was laughing at something he said, her head tilted back in that familiar way that used to be reserved for me. The dying man in the bed wasn't just any patient. He was Daniel Ashworth, her first love. The one she'd told me about in fragments over the years, always with a distant sadness I'd mistaken for closure. The nurse brushed past me with a clipboard, and I stepped back from the window. My hands felt cold despite the hospital's stifling warmth. I'd come here to bring Olivia dinner after her 12-hour shift, the way I did every Thursday. The plastic container of homemade pasta felt suddenly heavy in my grip. I didn't knock. I didn't go inside. I just stood there, watching her stroke his hair with a tenderness I hadn't seen in months. Maybe longer. When had she last looked at me like that? When had her eyes last held that kind of softness? I turned and walked back down the corridor, my footsteps echoing against the linoleum. The pasta went into the trash bin by the elevator. I drove home in silence, no music, no thoughts, just the mechanical act of steering through familiar streets that suddenly felt like foreign territory. We'd met 4 years ago at a charity fundraiser. I was there representing my architecture firm. She was there as a trauma nurse being honored for her work during a mass casualty event. When they called her name, she'd walk to the stage with this quiet confidence that made everyone in the room lean forward. I'd introduced myself at the reception afterward, and she'd smiled at me with genuine warmth. "You're the one who designed that community center in Riverside," she'd said, surprising me. "My nephew goes there for after-school programs." That was Olivia, always paying attention, always remembering the details that mattered. We'd talked for 2 hours that night, long after the other guests had filtered out. She told me about her work, about the weight of holding lives in her hands. I told her about creating spaces where lives could flourish. It felt like the beginning of something rare. Our relationship grew slowly, deliberately. She worked brutal hours at the hospital, but she always made time. Sunday mornings were ours. Farmers' market runs, cooking breakfast together, reading the newspaper on opposite ends of the couch, with our feet touching in the middle. She'd built this life with me, brick by careful brick. I'd proposed on the deck of a sailboat at sunset, just the two of us and the endless water. She'd cried and said yes before I could finish my rehearsed speech. We planned a small wedding, nothing extravagant. Just the people we loved, good food, and a celebration of what we'd built together. The date was set for 6 months away. That was before Daniel came back into the picture. She'd told me about him during one of those late-night conversations couples have when they're still excavating each other's histories. They dated in nursing school, young and intense, the kind of love that burns too bright to last. He'd ended it suddenly, moved across the country for a job opportunity, and she'd been devastated. But that was a decade ago, she'd assured me. Ancient history. A closed chapter. I'd believed her because I had no reason not to. 3 months ago, she came home from her shift with red-rimmed eyes. "Daniel's back," she'd said, setting her bag down with more force than necessary. "He's sick, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He's been admitted to our unit." I'd held her while she cried, rubbing circles on her back the way she liked. "I'm sorry," I'd murmured, meaning it. Death was never easy, especially when it wore a familiar face. "I need to be there for him," she'd said into my shoulder. "He doesn't have anyone else. His family's gone, and he never married. I need to do this." Of course she did. That was who Olivia was, compassionate to her core, unable to turn away from suffering. It was one of the things I loved about her. I'd kissed her forehead and told her I understood. I'd picked up extra hours at the firm to cover the gap when she started staying late at the hospital. I'd meal prepped for both of us so she wouldn't have to worry about cooking. I'd listened when she came home exhausted and needed to decompress. I'd been the supportive fiancé, the understanding partner, What I hadn't understood was that support could be mistaken for permission. The signs were subtle at first. She started mentioning him more often. Daniel said this. Daniel needs that. Daniel's afraid of dying alone. Her phone would buzz at odd hours, and she'd slip into the bathroom to take the call. She stopped wearing her engagement ring to work, said it got in the way of the latex gloves. I'd noticed but said nothing. Questioning her felt like doubting her character, and Olivia's character was supposed to be unshakable. Then came the weekend she asked me to skip our Sunday routine because she'd promised to bring Daniel some things from his apartment. The following week, she canceled our dinner with my parents because Daniel was having a bad day and needed her. The week after that, she forgot my birthday entirely until I mentioned it at 9 in the evening. "Oh my God, Nathan!" she'd gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "I'm so sorry. I've just been so focused on—" "Daniel," I'd finished for her. "I know." She'd tried to make it up to me, ordered my favorite takeout, and lit candles like that could retroactively make the day special. We'd eaten in uncomfortable silence, both of us aware we were going through motions neither of us felt. That night, lying in bed with her back to me, she'd whispered, "He's scared, Nathan. He's so scared of dying. I can't just abandon him." I'd stared at the ceiling, feeling something cold settle in my chest. "I'm not asking you to—" But maybe I should have been. The Thursday I saw them through the hospital window wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of understanding what the end would look like. I started paying closer attention, not out of suspicion, but out of something worse. Resignation. I was watching the slow unraveling of something I'd thought was permanent, and I was powerless to stop it. She began sleeping at the hospital, said it was easier than driving home between shifts. When she did come home, she was distant, her mind clearly elsewhere. We stopped having sex. We stopped having real conversations. We existed in parallel, two people sharing space but no longer sharing a life. I could have confronted her. Should have, probably. But there's a particular kind of humiliation in having to beg someone to choose you. I'd rather die than be that man. Instead, I waited. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was reviewing blueprints for a new project when my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Can you come to the hospital? Room 347. Need to talk." My stomach dropped. This was it. Whatever had been building was about to break through the surface. I arrived 20 minutes later. The corridor was quieter than it had been that Thursday, just the distant beep of monitors and the soft shuffle of nurses making rounds. Room 347's door was closed. I knocked once and entered. Olivia was sitting beside Daniel's bed, holding his hand. He looked worse than he had weeks ago. Gaunt, pale, his breathing labored even with the oxygen tubes, but his eyes were alert when they landed on me. "Nathan," Olivia said, standing. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked exhausted and beautiful, and like a stranger. "Thanks for coming." I nodded at Daniel. "How are you holding up?" He managed a weak smile. "Been better, been worse. Right now, I'm somewhere in between." There was an awkward silence. I looked between them, waiting. Olivia took a breath. "Daniel asked me something today. Something important." My hands curled into fists at my sides. I already knew. Somehow, I already knew. "He asked me to marry him," she continued, her voice steady, but her eyes unable to meet mine. "Here, in the hospital. Before it's too late. He wants to die as someone's husband, not alone. And she faltered. I said yes." The room tilted slightly. Or maybe I did. "You said yes." "Nathan, please understand. You said yes," I repeated, my voice flat. Daniel spoke up, his words weak but clear. "I don't have much time. Weeks, maybe. I just need to know I didn't leave this world without love. Without someone who's engaged to another man?" The words came out colder than I'd intended. Olivia flinched. "You're making this about you." "It is about me." I looked at my fiancé, This woman I'd built a life with, planned a future with. You're wearing my ring. We're supposed to get married in 3 months. This isn't the same thing, she said quietly. This isn't real marriage. It's a gesture. A kindness for a dying man who you loved first, I finished. Who you never really stopped loving. She opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. The truth hung between us like smoke. I looked at Daniel. His eyes held something I couldn't quite name. Regret, maybe? Or triumph? Perhaps both. When? I asked. Friday, Olivia whispered. The hospital chaplain agreed to do it. Just us and a witness. Nathan, it doesn't mean... It means everything. I stepped back toward the door. It means I was never enough. It means the last 4 years were just filler until he came back into your life. That's not fair. Fair? I almost laughed. You're asking me to watch you marry another man and calling it a kindness. You're asking me to understand while you destroy everything we built. What part of this is fair? Tears were streaming down her face now. He's dying. So am I said quietly. So is what we had. You're just not noticing. I turned and walked out. This time, I didn't look back through the window. I didn't need to see anymore. I drove home on autopilot. The apartment we shared felt like a museum of a life that was already over. Her coffee mug on the counter. Her jacket over the chair. Her books on the shelf mixed with mine. Evidence of entanglement that would need to be carefully separated. I sat on the couch for a long time, my mind strangely quiet. No rage, no tears. Just a deep, hollow acceptance. She came home around midnight. I heard her key in the lock, her soft footsteps in the hallway. She found me still sitting in the dark living room. Nathan, she said softly. Tell me one thing, I said without looking at her. Are you in love with him? The pause told me everything. I don't know, she finally whispered. I thought I was over it. Over him. But seeing him again, knowing he's dying, all those old feelings came back. I don't know if it's love, or grief, or guilt, or just... Does it matter? I asked. You're marrying him Friday. The why doesn't change the what. After, she said desperately. After, we can figure us out. We can go to counseling. We can... There is no after. I stood up, finally looking at her. You think I'm going to wait around while you play wife to a dying man? You think we're going to pick up where we left off once he's gone, and you've worked through your grief? Nathan. I deserve better than being someone's second choice, someone's backup plan. She was crying again. You're not a backup plan. I love you. Just not enough. The words tasted bitter. Not more than you love the idea of giving him a beautiful ending. Not more than you love being the hero of this tragic romance. That's cruel. It's true. I walked past her toward our bedroom. I'm going to pack some things. I'll be out by tomorrow. You can have the apartment until the lease is up. Where will you go? Does it matter? I could feel her watching me from the doorway as I pulled my suitcase from the closet. I packed methodically. Clothes, toiletries, laptop, the few personal items that felt important. The engagement ring I'd spent 3 months' salary on sat on the dresser. I left it there. You're really leaving, she said, her voice hollow. What did you think would happen? I zipped the suitcase closed. Did you think I'd just accept this? That I'd sit in the chapel on Friday and watch you marry him with a smile? I thought you'd understand. I thought you'd... Be a doormat? I turned to face her. Be so grateful you chose me first that I'd accept anything. I loved you, Olivia. Past tense. But I won't love someone who treats me like I'm disposable. Please don't go. Not like this. Let's talk about... There's nothing left to say. I picked up my suitcase. Marry him. Give him his dying wish. Live with what that choice means, but live with it without me. I walked past her again, and this time she didn't try to stop me. I paused at the front door. my hand on the knob. "I hope he dies knowing he won," I said quietly. "I hope it gives him peace." Then I left. The door closed behind me with a soft click that felt thunderous in the silence. I stayed with my colleague Robert for a week, sleeping on his couch and trying to figure out what came next. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a beer and told me the guest bathroom was down the hall. On Friday, I turned my phone off. I didn't want to know if she went through with it. I didn't want the message, the photo, the proof. I spent the day hiking alone in the mountains, pushing my body until exhaustion drowned out thought. When I finally turned my phone back on Saturday morning, there were 17 missed calls and a dozen texts. I deleted them all without reading them. On Monday, I went back to work. My boss took one look at me and assigned me to the new waterfront project, something that would require my full attention and frequent travel. I accepted gratefully. I stopped checking social media. I stopped driving past our old apartment. I stopped doing anything that might give me a window into Olivia's life. She'd made her choice. I was making mine. The first month was the hardest. I kept reaching for my phone to text her about small things, a funny sign I'd seen, a song that came on the radio, a breakthrough on a design problem. Muscle memory of partnership is hard to break. But slowly, day by day, I stopped reaching. The impulse faded. She became a memory instead of a presence. Robert convinced me to join him at the gym. "Nothing heals a broken heart like getting strong enough to break someone else's," he'd joked. But there was wisdom in it. I started going every morning before work, pushing weights until my arms shook and my mind went blessedly quiet. I took on more projects, traveled to 3 different cities for consultations. I redesigned my life the way I designed buildings, with intention, with purpose, with an eye toward the future instead of the past. I bought a loft downtown, all exposed brick and high ceilings and space that was entirely mine. I decorated it slowly, carefully, choosing each piece because I loved it, not because it matched someone else's taste. It became a sanctuary. 3 months after I left, I ran into one of Olivia's colleagues at a coffee shop, Maya, a fellow nurse from her unit. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me. "Nathan," she said, carefully. "How have you been?" "Good," I said, and meant it. "You?" "Busy." She hesitated. "Have you heard about—" "No?" I cut her off gently. "And I'd like to keep it that way." She nodded, understanding. But then she said something that made me pause. "He passed 3 weeks ago. I thought you should know." Daniel was dead. The man Olivia had chosen over me. The man she'd married in a hospital room while I was packing my life into boxes. He was gone. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. Maya looked at me with something like pity. "She asks about you sometimes. She's not doing well." "That's not my problem anymore." It sounded harsh, even to my own ears. But it was true. Her grief, her regret, her struggle, none of it was mine to carry. I'd put that weight down when I walked out the door. I didn't expect to hear from her directly. 6 months had passed, half a year of silence and separation. I'd moved on in all the ways that mattered. New apartment, new routines, new version of myself that didn't include her. But the text came anyway, late on a Thursday night. "Nathan, I know I don't have the right to ask, but I need to talk to you. Please. Just once. I need you to understand what happened." I stared at the message for a long time. My finger hovered over the delete button. But something, curiosity maybe, or a need for closure I hadn't admitted to, made me respond. "Fine. Coffee. Public place. Tuesday at 2 p.m. Riverside Cafe." Her response came immediately. "Thank you. I'll be there." She looked different when she walked into the cafe. Thinner, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Her hair was shorter, cut in a way that made her look older. She saw me in the corner booth and walked over slowly, like approaching something fragile. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Olivia." We ordered coffee from the waitress, black for me, oat milk latte for her. Some habits die hard. The silence between us was heavy with everything unsaid. "You look good," she finally said. "Healthy?" I'm glad." She wrapped her hands around her mug like she was cold. "I wasn't sure you'd agree to meet me." "I almost didn't." She nodded, accepting that. "I wanted to explain." "There's nothing to explain," I interrupted. "You made a choice. I made a choice. We both live with the consequences." It wasn't that simple. It was exactly that simple. I met her eyes. "You chose him. Everything else is just rationalization." Tears welled up, but she blinked them back. "I made a mistake." "I know." "I loved him," she continued, her voice breaking. "I thought I was doing something noble, something selfless. I thought I was giving a dying man peace. But the truth is, I was just running back to something familiar when it became safe, when there was an expiration date, when I wouldn't have to face the work of really being with someone long term." I said nothing, let her words fill the space between us. "After the wedding, everything changed," she went on. "He became demanding, angry. The sweet dying man act fell away, and I saw who he really was, why we broke up the first time. He was bitter and cruel, and he took it all out on me. Every fear, every pain, I became his target." "I'm sorry you went through that." "Are you?" She looked at me sharply. "Or are you glad I suffered?" "Both," I admitted. "I'm human. I won't pretend I didn't want you to regret what you did, but I'm also not the kind of person who enjoys watching someone suffer, even someone who hurt me." She started crying then, openly. "I was so wrong. About everything. About him, about us, about what I needed. I threw away something real for something that was already dead." "Yes, you did." "Can you forgive me?" The question hung in the air. I took a long sip of my coffee, choosing my words carefully. "I already have," I said. "Forgiveness isn't about you anymore. It's about me not carrying anger around like luggage. I've forgiven you because holding on to hate was exhausting." Hope flickered in her eyes. "Then we could—" "But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation," I continued. "What we had is gone, Olivia. You can't resurrect it any more than you could have saved Daniel." "I still love you." "Maybe you do, but it's not enough. It wasn't enough then, and it's not enough now." She was openly sobbing now, her shoulders shaking. Other patrons were starting to stare, but I didn't move to comfort her. That wasn't my job anymore. "I lost everything," she whispered. "My relationship with you, my self-respect. Even work has been difficult. People know what I did. They judge me." "Good," I said quietly. "Maybe that judgment will teach you what my love couldn't. That choices have consequences. That people aren't interchangeable. That you can't just expect someone to wait in the wings while you figure out your feelings." "That's so cold." "It's honest." I finished my coffee and stood up. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Olivia. I really do. But it won't be with me." "Nathan, please." "Take care of yourself." I walked out of the cafe without looking back. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. Behind me, I could hear her crying. But it didn't pull me back. That chapter was closed, and I'd already started writing a new one. A year later, I met someone new. Her name was Emma, and she was an environmental engineer I collaborated with on a sustainable housing project. She had laugh lines around her eyes and a sharp wit that kept me on my toes. We went for drinks after a project meeting, then dinner the next week, then coffee on Sunday morning. "I should tell you," I said over scrambled eggs and toast. "I was engaged before. It ended badly." "Okay," Emma said simply. "Do you still love her?" I thought about it honestly. No, I loved who I thought she was. The reality was different. "That's fair." She took a sip of orange juice. "For what it's worth, I was married before. He cheated. Took me 2 years to trust again." "And now?" Now I'm having breakfast with an architect who designed sustainable communities and apparently makes really good scrambled eggs. She smiled. I'm cautiously optimistic. I can work with cautiously optimistic. We took it slow, Emma and I. No rushing, no promises we weren't ready to keep. We built something steady, something real. She met my friends. I met her sister. We traveled together, fought occasionally, made up, grew. 2 years after I left Olivia, Emma moved into my loft. We didn't make a big deal of it, just helped each other carry boxes and argued about where to put the couch. It felt right in a way I'd almost forgotten relationships could feel. One evening, we were cooking dinner together when my phone buzzed. A Facebook message from an unknown account. Nathan, this is Olivia. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I thought you should know I'm getting help. Therapy, actually dealing with my issues instead of running. I'm not asking for anything, just wanted you to know that what you said mattered. I'm trying to be better. I showed Emma the message. What are you going to do? She asked, stirring the pasta sauce. Nothing, I said, setting my phone down. It's good that she's working on herself, but her journey isn't my concern anymore. Emma nodded, understanding. You're really over it. I really am. And I was. Olivia had become a story I told sometimes, a lesson learned, a chapter that made me who I was, but didn't define me. I didn't wish her harm. I didn't wish her anything at all. She'd simply stopped mattering. 5 years after I left, I married Emma in a small ceremony overlooking the ocean. We wrote our own vows, promising partnership and truth, and the hard work of choosing each other every day. My parents were there, and her sister, and the friends we'd collected along the way. It was simple and perfect, and exactly what we wanted. At the reception, Robert pulled me aside. You remember that night you showed up on my couch with a suitcase and dead eyes? Vividly. Look at you now. He clapped my shoulder. I'm glad you didn't let her break you. She didn't break me, I corrected. She just showed me I deserved better than what she was offering. Semantics, he grinned. Either way, I'm glad you found someone who knows what she has. Emma was laughing with my mother across the room, her wedding dress catching the light. She looked over and caught my eye, smiling in that way that still made my chest warm. I smiled back. I thought about Olivia briefly, wondering if she'd found her peace, if she'd learned what she needed to learn, if she'd become the person she'd been trying to become. But the thoughts were fleeting, curiosity without attachment. My life had moved on. I had moved on. And that was exactly as it should be. 10 years later, I was downtown with my daughter, Maya, 6 years old and full of opinions, when I saw Olivia. She was standing outside a bookstore, looking at her phone. Older, like all of us, but there was something settled about her that hadn't been there before. She looked up and saw me. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by something complicated. Not hope exactly, but not dread either. Just acknowledgement. I could have walked past. Probably should have. But Maya tugged my hand, asking about ice cream, and in that moment of distraction, Olivia approached. Nathan, she said quietly. It's been a long time. It has. She looked down at Maya. Is this your daughter? This is Maya, I said. Maya, this is Miss Olivia. We knew each other a long time ago. Hello, Maya said with the polite shyness of children meeting strangers. Hello, Olivia replied, her voice soft. To me, she said, she's beautiful. You look happy. I am? There was a pause. She looked like she wanted to say more, but I had nothing left to give her. This moment wasn't charged with anything. Not anger, not regret, not unfinished business. It was just two people who used to know each other, passing on a sidewalk. I'm glad, Olivia finally said. I'm glad you found what you were looking for. You too, I said, though I didn't know if she had. Maya tugged my hand again. Daddy, ice cream? Right. I looked at Olivia one last time. Take care. You too. I walked away with my daughter's hand in mine, already forgetting the encounter by the time we reached the ice cream shop. Emma was meeting us there after her meeting, and we were going to see a movie as a family. My life was full of these small, perfect moments now. Olivia had become what she should have been all along, a memory without power, a lesson learned, a chapter I'd closed so thoroughly I barely remembered the details. She'd faded into the background of my history where she belonged. That night, after Maya was asleep and Emma and I were getting ready for bed, she asked, "Who was that woman today? The one outside the bookstore?" "Just someone I used to know," I said, brushing my teeth. "An ex?" "The ex," I clarified. "The one I told you about." Emma came to stand in the doorway. How did that feel? Seeing her? I thought about it. Like seeing someone from high school. Familiar, but distant. Not painful, just over. She smiled. That's the best kind of over. It really is. Later, lying in bed with Emma reading beside me and the sounds of our daughter's soft breathing coming from the next room, I realized I'd truly won. Not because Olivia suffered or because I'd proven something to her. I'd won because I'd refused to settle for less than I deserved. Because I'd chosen myself when she wouldn't choose me. Because I'd built a life so full and rich that the past couldn't touch it. Olivia could keep her regrets, her what-ifs, her memories of the man who'd walked away. I had something infinitely better, a present worth living and a future worth building. She'd married a dying man in a hospital room, thinking she was writing a beautiful ending to a tragic love story. What she'd actually been writing was the ending to us. And while her story ended in grief and regret, mine had continued into something better. I'd quietly packed my bags and left alone, but I hadn't stayed alone. I'd found partnership, love, family, everything she'd thrown away in pursuit of a fantasy. Her silence after I left had been her loudest punishment. My absence had been her harshest consequence, and my happiness now was proof that I'd been right to walk away. I turned off my light and kissed Emma goodnight. She mumbled something sleepy and loving, already half asleep. I closed my eyes, content in a way I'd once thought impossible. Somewhere out there, Olivia was living with her choices. I was living with mine. And I'd never been more certain I'd made the right one. The past was a ghost that no longer haunted me. I'd exorcised it the moment I left, and I'd never looked back with anything more than passing curiosity. That was the real victory. Not that she suffered, but that her suffering didn't matter to me anymore. I'd become someone she could never reach. Someone who'd moved so far beyond our shared history that it barely registered as real. I'd built walls she couldn't scale, bridges she couldn't cross, a life she'd never be part of. And in that untouchable distance, I'd found my peace.